Every once in a while, we have an article from Zero Hedge. They do lean a little bit one direction when it comes to economics and capitalism and things like that. I wanted to bring this article to the table today because they are basically laying out the case that renters and owners live in separate economies. Most of this I completely see firsthand. Most of this we see when we talk to people here. Most of this we will see when we go through our neighborhoods and our communities here in San Diego. I cannot sit here and attest that this is true in all places of the country, but I can say in general, broad brush stroke, I agree with the sentiment. Let's get into the reasons why. Okay? So it turns out the renters and homeowners are living in two entirely different economies, at least according to a new study by the Federal Reserve, which ironically enough made it happen. Article said it, not me. But hey, mark me down as agree. 10 out of 10 would not recommend.
Yes.
Would not recommend.
No.
So yeah, a lot of this is at the hands of the Fed. They don't want to take responsibility for this. I have no problem laying this down at the feet of the decisions of the Fed. So this chart here we have, it says financial distress among non-elderly adults by housing tenure. And on the left side of the chart, it says financially insecure, with only 24% of the people saying they're financially insecure are homeowners, and 46% of renters are saying they're financially insecure. Let me repeat that. 24% of homeowners say they're financially insecure, and 46% of renters saying they're financially insecure. Now, Brian, is this true from your perspective and your seat in the table?
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Or is it just the chart saying that?
So, I mean, I'll give you an example. When one of my clients needed to pay off debt because, they just completely had to take out expenses and, things happen. If they had not had their house to be able to tap into that equity, it would have been very difficult for them to get out of that rut.
You're talking about personal debt?
Yeah, personal debt, yeah. Right?
What was it? Give me the context. What kind of personal debt were we talking about here?
It's like student loans, credit card debt.
So student loans that weren't paid off by the government?
Exactly. Student loans, credit card debt, and just basically personal loans that they took out and accumulated.
Okay.
So I see that if you're a renter and you fall in, and you hit a financial crisis or, a financial obstacle, you better have savings, or you should have some sort of, fund where you can, use that money for a rainy day. Now, same thing if you're a homeowner, should have a savings. But let's say you don't and something happens. You have your house to leverage as an asset to say, hey, I know I don't want to, but I could tap into my equity to take the money out needed, and, I will be okay. Or I could sell the house and call it a day and I will be okay. So you have that security blanket per se to be able to, hold on to if you need it for a rainy day. Now, if you're a renter, you better have that security blanket in another way, or if you don't have it, you really just don't have any options. So you're going to have to resort to a different type of solution, So with your house, I could see why you have a lot more confidence, a lot more security, because that thing you could put it up on the market and sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on how much you owe.
Yeah, I mean, and I get that, but then also if you can't go right back to being a homeowner again, you're talking about and then putting yourself back into a position where you're renting. Now that may be temporary, but what your argument here is saying, look, these people had a lot of debt that they personally had acquired. They needed to pay it off. The house was basically the problem solver in this case, where they were able to use and leverage the house's equity in order to pay off their debt, right? Now, remember last week, though, we talked about how this is a survey of financial insecurity. Last week, remember, we kind of introduced the term, at least new for our show, was shelter insecurity, where people I don't know, because we're talking about, remember the generations, what are their top voting topics by generation? Housing, and one of them was, one of the main things we talked about was housing, and the other one was economics. And so the housing and economics go hand in hand for us here at the show. Like, we talk about this a lot, and all the things we discuss could basically categorize in one or two or both those categories kind of all the time. Now, this whole financial insecurity thing being so vastly different between homeowners and renters, I think is because of what you're talking about. Is that, okay, well, if I have to sell my house, I can. Or if I have to refinance my house to save some money, I can. Or if I got to take some cash out to pay off some debt, I can. If I got to get a home equity line of credit to cure whatever this problem is over here, I can. And, you just don't have those opportunities as a renter. And that can also then lead to this sentiment where they feel broadly more financially insecure than homeowners do.
And I was just hearing this morning, from 2019 to now, rents have gone up 70%.
Yeah.
And I was letting that kind of digest in my mind, and I'm like, that's insane. Like you literally almost 100% of your rent. And it dawns on me like, okay, what if you don't have that extra money? now you have to move elsewhere. You have to adjust your lifestyle. You have to, really kind of go back to the drawing board, see what you're going to do. Some people have to leave the state.
Yeah.
And that's horrible because you have no control over that.
Right.
Like things just go up. Your wages don't go up to meet that difference. Mm-hmm. And it sucks because that bill, that amount is due every month, regardless if your income is up or not. So
yeah. Well, and that's actually evidenced in part of this article too, is because they're talking about housing costs climbing during the pandemic while renters' income stagnated. And the difference in the disparity here is that median rent, at least in this measurement adjusted for inflation, was 17.9%. I know the number you're talking about from the 70 number, but this is from all the way back in like 2001. Okay, but the median renter household income overlap is 3.2%. So there's a massive gap between median rent running way out ahead of median renter household income. Now, again, these are medians. So there's a lot of people that are totally fine renting and have a lot of extra money.
Yeah.
And they have discretionary income.
Yeah.
And there's people that we know that own homes that are honestly financially
tight
in a bad spot. So it's not that it's only one way or only the other. There's always a mix. But in this chart here, it's evidencing one of the core problems, which is people are running from behind, trying to chase it down, and they're unable to get it broadly.
And that's what one of the biggest things that came out of all of this is that regardless of what's happening in the world, we care about this. This is our biggest problem. And until we're able to figure this out, I mean, people are just going to struggle and continue to have to figure out alternative ways to be able to come up with that difference because it's just not making sense anymore. Well,
and the next survey that they did here is the Gallup poll, which is Americans' outlook for the economy, and only 30% as of January of 2024 are saying 30% look like it's getting better, and 63% are saying it's getting worse. Now, the peak for people saying it was getting worse looks like it was back in like spring, summer of 2022, right when the Fed started raising rates. So I'd say that looks like about 85% of people said that then.
This is pretty straight on because there's not much has happened drastically since then, and we've just been kind of like cruising this.
What do you mean nothing happened since then? What's wrong with you?
Well, no, not in a sense.
I'm just kidding. I'm just jabbing you, dude.
Not in the sense like drastically, like rates have been going up since then, but at that point. We reached November of last year, the worst time for rates. Right. And then since then, we've kind of leveled down.
Yeah.
But, we've been and I think that's pretty steady on the feeling for the economy.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think things are going to get better just yet. There still has to be a little bit more of,
yes, I agree with you. But one of the arguments, and we've talked about this on the show too, when it comes to inflation and comes to consumer prices and all that, like one of the potential challenges is that prices for consumer goods are able to be upheld by the people who have the let's say the equity, not just equity in their house, but they have they have cash flow every month, so they have discretionary income. They can still go on vacation. They can go out to the movies. They can go to the expensive, sports ball game that you got to pay $500 for a ticket to. That's not a shared experience for most of Americans right now. And I think that's why you see this number the way it is.
Oh, 100%.
You see a lot of people saying it's getting, basically 2/3 saying it's getting worse, 1/3 saying it's getting better.
And it sucks because it depends on your situation. Some people are probably like, hey, this is probably the best time that I've ever been at. Like, I'm doing very well. And other people are like, yo, like, the worst times, horrible situation. And there's no, how do I say? It's either you're doing fairly well or you're somewhat in a struggle.
Well, yeah. It's almost
there's
like
no middle ground.
It's getting gooder for the people who are in the good, and it's getting worse for the people who are already in the worst. And some of the things that were talked about here in the article it has to do with all the refinancing we did. I mean, we kind of make the joke we refinanced half the planet in 2020 and 2021, but I mean, those were back to back the most amount of mortgage volume funded ever in those 2 years concurrently.
And you think about the people that make, smart financial decisions that are organized. A lot of that money that was cheap back then, they utilized that to only profit more, to only set themselves up more. And now the people that took that money and strategically used it to their benefit, right now they're good because they said, hey, I leveraged the Fed. Thank you so much. I took this, put it over here, and now it's very fruitful for me.
VA mortgage rates in the 2s.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, conventional loans in the 2s and the 3s. I mean, dude, the refinancing think about it created a ton of cash.
Those people that just completely tank their payments and they have literally $600,000-$700,000 house and their payment is sub $3,000 or sub $4,000. You're your payment, you saved yourself so much more money that you could use to do other things.
That's what I'm saying. It
Like,
creates it creates gaps. Not like gap spending. That's that someone's going to go. That's not what gap spending is. It creates more margin in your monthly budget. So if your income is your monthly salary income is the same every single month, but you've reduced the cost of your housing payment, you've clawed back $500 or $1,000 a month to do whatever you want. Pay down debt if you want to do that. If you had debt, or discretionarily spend it if you want, or just deal and pad yourself with the inflation that everyone's paying at the price at the register.
Yep.
So in that example, given the set of those circumstances, knowing that for back-to-back years we did the most refinancing as an industry ever, and then at the same time that gave people the lowest payments ever with the lowest rates ever, then it makes sense that there are still a good section of the surveyors saying, yeah, things are great. Doesn't bother me at all. And then it also makes sense that the other side is like, oh, this is terrible. I'm playing catch up. I can't catch up. I'm out of breath. My legs are tired, and that thing's running way ahead of me. I don't know if I'm going to catch it. Yeah. And I get that. I totally get that. So
completely two different worlds.
Right. So I'm going to read like straight for this because I want this to come across. If you are not a Zero Hedge reader, here's a taste. It's a whole other world for homeowners who overwhelmingly refinanced during the pandemic at average rates around 3%, taking hundreds of thousands out of their Fed-pumped homes. They plowed a good chunk of that money into stocks, which also soared thanks to the Fed's near-zero interest rates, the so-called everything bubble, courtesy of the Fed. That means homeowners actually saved money compared with pre-pandemic. They had a larger mortgage, sure, but at 3%, the Fed actually lowered their monthly nut. Exactly what we're talking about right now. How many times do we see this? Now, for the people who own a home and who are able to do that, I'll say they're sitting pretty as an easy way to kind of summarize the general consensus. They're sitting pretty. They have lots of choices. Even our friends that are moving out of state, they had a VA loan that their payments really low, and their home equity is high, and they're going to walk out with hundreds of thousands of dollars and move out of California. And that's because they refinanced at a ultra low rate back in the pandemic days. Their payment was low, and because prices came back up or stayed and then kind of nudged back up again, now they're going to be able to sell at the new top with a low rate and take all their equity and go buy in the new state they're going to, which I won't mention. So
Texas.
What? How'd you know that?
Was it the friend you were looking for, that 77 acres?
Wait, what? Those stories are connected together? Yeah.
Wow, I pay attention.
Actually trying to figure out how to help him get that house. I think that would be a super dope deal.
Oh, that sounds like an awesome. No, it sounds awesome. Trust me.
76 acres sounds like there's room for good old Uncle Andy over there at the ranch.
So I've seen a lot of people move towards the idea of building compounds where they just buy a huge area and put multiple parcels in there. Mm-hmm. I honestly think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's like
for a long time that's how homes and legacies got passed on, is that the family had like a big piece of land and they just they built other homes or other structures, and then it just became something that got passed down. I mean, there's people here in East County and San Diego that I know who every time the land connected to theirs came up for sale, they just bought it. And they didn't even put anything. They just bought it. So they completely like encircled themselves and their main house and their main area, which also has 2 other homes on it already.
That's badass.
So it's a main home, 2 other homes, and then they just bought the land around it. Now they completely insulated themselves from basically neighbors.
Yeah.
Not to double middle finger them. They're just thinking, look, we have this nice retreat for ourselves and for our family, and there's 3 structures on it. And that they've done this over the course of 22 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't, I'm just going to gobble up everything. Some billionaire flew into town and just bought it all. But it was just, that other 20 acres is available, let's buy it. The next 40 acres is available, let's buy it. And somehow, and in part to what your point was earlier, where the house is the leverage for doing the thing you want to do, that was some of the case. They owned real estate, owned properties, had lots of investment and rentals, plus had a place that was generating enough equity that it could be used to go buy the places when in the surrounding area. When they came up, it ended up affording them to be able to do all those things. Isn't that crazy?
Such a chess play.
Yeah.